That's the easy one.
I would have to say to each of the candidates, I knew Bobby Kennedy. I worked with Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy was a friend of mine. And you, madam, you, sir. So we haven't seen a Bobby Kennedy since any more than Putin is Gorbachev, let's say. And there hasn't, this world has needed a Gorbachev. And it needed Bobby Kennedy. I don't know who I would give as the third person there. We haven't seen a progressive candidate like that since McGovern. I personally, I didn't love George McGovern, let's just say, but yes, his programs and whatnot. The only person, candidate we've had who's talked about actually reducing the defense budget as a candidate. So anyway, you know, he would feel what I would suppose we all feel, except more so that he possibly could have helped. It's a very appalling situation we see now, and I have to say that because there's no question at all in my mind that Trump must be defeated, and Hillary must win, no question about that. Nevertheless, whereas I saw Bobby Kennedy, and he saw himself as, increasingly I thought, as someone who understood why and how intensely we must get out of Vietnam. I'm afraid, put Trump aside, that Hillary Clinton, he would look at it as somebody who is quite likely to follow the generals and even to be ahead of the generals militaristically and to get us into new wars. I think we have a future of more wars ahead of us with Hillary Clinton, who I hope wins the presidency, and it's a very bright prospect as far as I can see, because she is not going to handle Syria and the Middle East in general, or Afghanistan, or Iraq, or Ukraine in the way that I think Bobby Kennedy would have. And you know, I think it's in your book, isn't it, that when, well, maybe not, I think so, that the Kennedys conveyed to Khrushchev the hope for a détente, which was later associated with Henry Kissinger, for which Henry Kissinger is anathema to the right wing of the Republican Party now, because he was for a friendly relation. Bobby stood for that. Now, to some degree, for unexplained reasons, Trump stands for that. If you could believe anything that he said, which I can't, his notion that we should be working with Russia and not have a new Cold War, I'm certain that Bobby would agree with that. Certain. Unfortunately, the Democratic leader does not.
So I think that we don't have to hypothesize too much, because America of 1968 looks in so many ways like America of today. It was similarly racially riven. It was similarly at odds overseas with situations that really threatened to erode it. And we had a candidate, while Donald Trump may be unhinged, we had a candidate in 1968 who was almost as divisive a candidate in Richard Nixon in terms of appealing to white anger and white flight. And I think that what Bobby Kennedy, I think, would say today is, if you wait another 50 years to take on the issues that he was trying to take on in 1968, 50 years from now, we will say America again looks like we're revisiting these same issues. And Bobby Kennedy, as Daniel suggested, Bobby Kennedy was in 1968 building a coalition that has never been assembled in America. It was precisely what he said, the coalition of angry, Trump-like whites who Bobby Kennedy had support of from who he was in 1957. The Reagan Democrats, we called them in a later generation. He was trying to build a coalition of those blue-collar whites and African Americans. He was the first politician on the national stage to take seriously the Hispanic vote. And he got, in this state of California, thanks to Cesar Chavez, but thanks to Bobby Kennedy, he got in Mexican-American districts nearly 100% of the vote in 1968. He went and campaigned, and is the only candidate probably ever to go and campaign on Indian reservations, a Native American vote amounted to one fraction of percent, but Bobby Kennedy thought that was important enough. So he was building a coalition of all the liberals, of blue-collar conservatives, and of all the have-nots and minorities that was extraordinary. And that is what Hillary Clinton dreams of doing today. But I don't think she's close to really tapping into that. And she's got Donald Trump out there making it easy for her now in terms of just not being Donald Trump. But I hope by the end of this campaign, the most insightful analysis ever written about Bobby Kennedy was not written by a political reporter. It was written in 1966 by a cartoonist named Jules Feiffer. And Jules Feiffer wrote a famous cartoon called The Bobby Twins. And it talked about the good Bobby and the bad Bobby. The good Bobby was the one who stood up to George Wallace in the schoolhouse door in Alabama. The bad Bobby was the one who appointed racist judges in the South. And he went through everything, sort of the two sides of Bobby Kennedy. By the end of the campaign in 1968, there was one Bobby Kennedy, and that was a good Bobby Kennedy. He had resolved his internal contradictions to the point where he was the most authentic politician most reporters and most Americans had seen in a very long time. And I wrote a column when I was going to Philadelphia during the week of the Democratic Convention for the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper called Good Hillary, Bad Hillary, and saying that Hillary Clinton ought to learn the Bobby Kennedy lesson, and hopefully by the end of this campaign, we would have just a good Hillary left. And I think Bobby Kennedy is her supposed role model, and he has been Barack Obama's role model, and I hope by the end of the campaign, she can find that voice that he managed to at the end of 1968.